What is the fine-tuning argument? The fundamental forces and constants of physics are themselves delicately balanced or fine-tuned in order for the universe to be able to sustain life. When I was at Cambridge, one of my lecturers in cosmology was Dennis Sciama, a Mancunian who had been trained by the brilliant physicists Dirac and Bondi. He explained fine-tuning this way. If you change a little bit the laws of nature, or you change a little bit the constants of nature, like the charge on the electron, then the way the universe develops is so changed. It is very likely that intelligent life would not have been able to develop. So let's imagine what we might call a universe generator, a machine with dials that control the values of those physical constants. And you'll see my version is very sophisticated. It produces 3 universes at once. Now, to get our universe, we must set these dials very carefully to a specific position. If we alter their settings even by a little, we might get a different universe, or more likely, none at all. Now, one of the great characters in cosmology was Sir Fred Hoyle. He was one of the fearsome examiners for my finals at Cambridge. And I recall very vividly him coming to Cardiff and saying to a packed audience that he'd done the mathematical calculations and shown that life could not have originated on Earth, but had arrived from outer space on comets. There was a huge intake of incredulous breath. Now, Hoyle was interested that for life to exist on Earth, an abundant supply of carbon is needed. Carbon is formed either by combining 3 helium nuclei or by combining nuclei of helium and beryllium. He found that for this to happen, the nuclear ground state levels have to be fine-tuned with respect to each other. This phenomenon is called resonance. If the variation were more than 1% either way, the universe could not sustain life. Hoyle said, "It looked as if a super intellect has monkeyed about with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces in nature worth talking about." He also said, intriguingly, that nothing shook his atheism like that discovery. He was most impressed by that single example of fine-tuning. British Astronomer Royal Lord Rees wrote a book entitled Just 6 Numbers, about 6 of the fundamental constants of nature. One of them is associated with the energy released in the fusion reaction within stars as hydrogen gets converted to helium. It is a value of 0.007. And Martin Rees says that if it were reduced to 0.006, the universe would be entirely composed of hydrogen, and there would be no chemistry and no life. On the other hand, if it were increased by the same amount, there would be no fuel for stars, no water, and no life. But these examples of the band of tolerance involved in fine-tuning pale into insignificance when we consider the fineness of the tuning of some of the other parameters of nature. For instance, there are 4 fundamental forces in nature that make the universe the way it is. 2 of these are the electromagnetic force and the gravitational force. The electromagnetic force is what holds atoms together, and it's fundamental to chemistry. And gravity is what weighs on my mind whenever I try at my age to go upstairs. Now, the ratio of these 2 constants must be very delicately balanced. Imagine increasing it by 0.3801%, which is a very small amount, something like the tiny, tiny probability of winning the national lottery 6 weeks in a row. If that is the case, only small stars can exist. Decrease this ratio by the same amount, and there will only be large stars. And you've got to have both large and small stars in the universe. The large ones produce elements in their thermonuclear furnaces, and it is only the small ones that burn long enough to sustain a planet with life. To use an illustration, again due to Paul Davies, that's the kind of accuracy a marksman would need to hit a coin at the far side of the observable universe 20 billion light years away. Now this is impressive, but again it's trumped by the example given by Sir Roger Penrose, arguably one of the brightest, most brilliant mathematical physicists alive today. He says that in order to get a universe like ours in which an entropy law holds, that is, in which disorder increases so that even your Aston Martin will rust, the Creator's aim, and that's his phrase, not mine, the Creator's aim must be accurate to 1 in 10 to the power 10 to the power 123. A number so large that if you put a 1 here and a 0 on every elementary particle in the universe, you cannot write it out. In other words, take all the particles in the universe, put a special mark on one of them, the prize atom, say, and then blindfold, you have to pick it out of the entire universe. The probability of doing so is still a much larger number than Penrose's aiming creator. Now, when you add this up, one discovers that a great majority of scientists of varying worldview persuasions accept that the universe is fine-tuned for life. For instance, Alan Sandage, George Ellis, Don Page, Frank Tipler, and John Polkinghorne are theists. Stephen Weinberg, Roger Penrose, Martin Rees, Stephen Hawking are atheists. The fact is that virtually no one makes a serious challenge to the basic proposition that the universe is improbably fine-tuned for life. So how is this fine-tuning to be explained? Now, one obvious candidate is that there is a creator God who is the fine-tuner. And we shouldn't forget that this belief dominated the intellectual landscape for centuries and contributed to the rise of modern science.
The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. From Psalms 19, I recommend meditating on that one. Everything screams of the glory of God. Christ is King, and every knee will bow. Absolutely.